Here we go. Ready? Oh, who's better than me? Yeah.
Hey, what's up guys? Check it out. Here's my uppercase. Now this uppercase is completely different than the one that's at RISD. If you can remember back what RISD's looked like, it had 4 drawers along the bottom, 2 really big drawers, 2 tiny drawers, and then every other cubby was a drawer, okay? And then from there, I think there were 10 pigeonhole assemblies across the top. And I think that there were some dados on the sides of the case, and where this projection comes out of the front was different. The valances are different. The thickness of all of the drawer dividers, the pigeonhole dividers are different. Basically, this is a completely different case. The one at RISD has very thin pigeonhole dividers, and it has really kind of different style of drawers here. They almost look like Boston drawers with a little fan on them, and I don't think that they typically would have been in an uppercase. At least that's my belief. I could be wrong, I'm not too sure. So instead of me filming every little process about how I built this, I figured I would just build it and then give you guys a little quick breakdown. Alright, the first thing that I decided to do, well, I got inspiration. Steve and I spent, literally weeks to figure out the pediment, the doors, the embellishment on the doors, the location of the candle pulls. It wasn't like I just could have started making a box. I really had to break down a piece, and this is the piece that I feel as though best represents the highest style of Boston Bombay furniture. And I took a lot of aspects of this uppercase pediment. I like the way that the pediment rakes. I like the doors on it. I like the fact that this still has mirrored doors, which we're going to put on. We're going to put mirrors on this one. And I love the gilding around the edges of the scallop of the upper doors. And I really like this capital, and I like the fretwork across the top. And the pediment, well, I'll just talk about the pediment at a different day. But I needed to know the location of this capital, and the thickness of this pilaster, and the bottom capital. Well, it's not called the capital, I forget what they call it. But I need to know this base before I could figure out where the candle pulls were on that piece. Because as you can see, this one doesn't have any candle pulls, okay? And I wanted these candle pulls to land dead center on those on the bottom scallop of those doors. So Steve and I spent a long time, all right, guys, breaking things down. And this is going to be very tough to see. It's up against the wall, and you can barely see it. But you can see the detail of the pediment, the rake, the front board, this fascia board with all the fretwork on it, the thickness of this board, and the pilaster. And here are all the curves. Steve is a genius when it comes to just doing things with compasses. I would have been struggling for a long time. And Steve drew this. Him and I would talk and talk about perspective, and it's a challenge to get a perspective like this. Believe me, it wasn't like we just could have went down to the local lumberyard and grabbed a piece of crown molding. We had to figure out which best looks good on the top of this case. And then you want to kind of design some of this by the cutter heads that you have in your shop. This is a little really cool detail I love. From up underneath, when you look up at it from 8 feet, that's like a little fascia board that's on a house. Typically all this architecture came from a building. So what this little thing does is act like an old piece of drip edge. So before they had regular drip edge, so rainwater would come down here and it would just fall right off of there instead of climbing back up underneath. But whatever, this is really derived from ancient architecture, and I could spend the next 4 hours talking about architecture with you, but I'm just going to talk about this piece. So you travel down, you can see the bottom of it. You see the thickness of the board, the thickness of the blocking, the thickness of this piece, and now I have the location of the candle pull, okay? But before I could even build this box, I had to figure out this detail first, all right? Because of this detail on that bottom piece of molding dictates the width of my case. So let me come back over to the case and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, well, remember I told you before, after I made the mistake on the doubler, is that it's very important to make sure that you run your moldings first, all right? So this is the base molding we decided to go with, and we agonized over this as well. It's not like this stuff is just in a book and you say, yeah, that's the detail. We really agonized over these two curves, you know. We may be nuts, but this is what we do, all right? Because I'm really trying to make this really perfect. So you can see that this is how it goes. It sits right on the case, all right? I have the upper case clamped. It's not in perfect position. But this is where it wants to be, all right? It wants to be nice and flush with the side of the case. And then it comes out here, it gets a 45 and it goes around the whole front profile of this. So I needed to know this right here before I could make the box, obviously. And the same thing with the front. You see? It's perfectly right in line with the front of it. Now that one, sorry guys, this piece of molding gets attached to a frame. Okay, I made this frame. This frame goes in between the lower case and the upper case. And then this piece of molding gets attached to the frame. You see this right here? And what it does, it makes a rabbet. You can see that? And this gets glued to the top case, and then it gets screwed. And then the upper case just slides up against and butts up against this piece of molding. So, I needed to do that with this piece of molding. I mean, and it really seems like remedial. And it almost seems like it was a pointless thing to have to do before I built the box, but you know what? It was very important because you can see the location of the candle pull, all right? And if I just didn't think about that and I held that up there, look at that. It doesn't work. So what I needed to do was have all that information in my hands before I even built this thing. So after I got all the pediment detail, the lowercase detail, the lower molding detail, I can start my box. Now, it's just a dovetail box, all right, guys? Just like the dovetails that I built on the drawers in the bottom of the Bombay, except it's a box. It doesn't have the curves on it. So you can see that it's a dovetail box, and it has dovetail drawers, all right, with the bottom on it, just like the lower drawers. I mean, it's like after you start to really get into this thing, it's mostly repetition. Now, the one at the RISD Museum had a short drawer right here. And I think that it might have had a little detail on it. Then it had really big, long drawers that you could have for paper, I think. So let me take these out. So you can see that the dividers have a miter on the front of them. You see that miter that's on the front? And you see how it has a stop data on the bottom? What I needed to do was, like in the lower pigeonhole assembly, I needed to run dados along this whole entire piece. All right, after I built the box, the first thing I needed to do was figure out the location of all these pigeonhole dividers. And that was no easy task because you can see that the top one is in line with all the other ones, and this one is in line with the top one here. So the information that I needed to gather took me a while, you know, and these ones are in line, and you know, you just want this thing to look clean. At least that was my attempt. I wanted everything to be in a nice even line. You can even see that the line of the shelving is in line with the pigeonhole divide. And you can see that the backboard, you can't even see it. But if you look inside here, you can see the backboard. See it? I wanted that to be in line as well, so you really didn't see it so much. And it started out with this piece of MDF. I've since cut this piece of MDF, but I think that you can get an idea of what I did. I laid it all out evenly. I broke up the top into 9 even spots, and then I just ran my router bit with the Bosch Colt. I ran this little router bit. This is a 90-bit, okay, and I just barely set it in there. I mean, barely set it in there. And you probably remember how I did it on the pigeonhole assembly. So it's the same application. I ran one, okay, and then I put a piece of MDF up against the side, and I ran the other one. Took that piece of MDF, ran this one. Then I made a piece of MDF for this one, I ran it, and then I ran that one until I just had the last one to run. These two right here. So everything was indexed off the side. And when I did this one, I made sure that I did this bottom one and got an index for here. It's kind of like a puzzle, except that you have to make all your own puzzle pieces. And I'm sure that they did the same thing with the RISD piece. And all these pieces are slid in from the back, okay? So I'm just going to try to explain it. This is very, very thin. And you can see that what I like about it is it looks like there are 4 separate pieces of wood. but it's not. It's only 3, because this is a solid piece. And what I did was I stuck this piece in, and then I ran the Bosch Colt with that piece of MDF that I had on the top. I ran that piece, okay? And then I pulled it out and I flipped it upside down and I slid it back in. And then I ran the bit again. And it made this piece really, really flimsy and flexible. But I made sure that I had this piece so it could sit on it. And I just did that for all 4 of them. And once you get going, it's not that tough. You just got to really be careful and make sure you don't set this thing too deep. Because I set it too deep a couple of times and, you know, obviously I went through the piece of wood. So after I dry fit all this and I had all these pieces in, it was time to make the shape. Now the shape of these ones and the shape of these valances is different than the one at RISD as well. Steve and I, again, we agonized over what would have been typical for a shape, what the shape should look like, what did it look like, and you know what, there are just way too many examples. And it seems like, you know, whoever built it just went with whatever they thought was nice. So Steve and I talked about it, and we were over there, and we really agonized over it, and this is what we came up with. Cool, huh? The reason why we went with this is because we feel as though it kind of represents the serpentine look of the Bombe Secretary, and it's kind of a cool little hook. So it almost looks like a negative space and a positive space, but this is the outside, okay? Not the inside, it goes out. So if you can see the balance from the side view of it, you know, you can see that it looks like a serpentine shape, you know? And I kind of like it. You know, it looks like what the drawer is going to look like on the bottom. Because again, we're trying to tie the uppercase to the lowercase, you know? So, it's the same procedure that you saw me shape these lower pieces with, okay? I had the piece of scratch stock, and I had the chainsaw file, and I filed it, and then I just rounded it over and I cleaned it all up. And then after I did that, you know, it was time to make the valances. All right, now this is the shape of the valance. And now that I've got them in, this is going to be interesting when I have a critique, because of me personally, I feel as though these are a little too thick. I mean, maybe a 16th, you know, 3/32 maybe. I just feel as though they're just a little too heavy. But it might offset all right, because I feel as though these are heavier than the one that's at the RISD Museum. Like I said, I think those ones like a 16th. They were tiny. I didn't realize until after I had this built. I went to the museum, and this thing was tiny. But I like these ones. They look better to me personally, you know. And when it's critiqued, hopefully others will feel the same way. But what I did was I basically took the pattern from the bottom, and I went to a copy machine, and I kept blowing it up until it fit this spot perfectly. So that's the perspective that I got. So I took this one, made a pattern, and then I just started fitting them. I fit them all in there, and I made sure, again, it's very important that you make this stuff all out of the same piece of wood. Check it out. You know those big giant boards I was surfing on? This is all that's left. And I would have used this piece of wood, but the grain direction in it changes too much. And I mean, look at it. It twisted this board, and this board's 3 inches thick, rather. So, I don't know what I'm going to do with this piece of wood, but back to the case. You can see that this case has got all the same color, all the same tones and textures. It's because I built it out of one piece of wood. I wanted to make sure that this whole interior cabinet looks the same, okay? And now that I have it all built and I'm starting to work on the exterior, you can see that the wood is different, okay? This wood came from the block of wood that I built the pigeonhole assembly and all the drawer fronts out of it. So hopefully, when this thing is finished, it's going to have the same wood on the drawers, the lid, the interior, and the whole front and pediment. I barely have enough wood. I have like one piece of wood 3 inches thick, like maybe 12 inches wide, 4 feet long. So that's all I have to make these doors and the embellishment. And thank God I have all the stuff for the pediment already. Now the pediment that we chose to do on this one is totally different than the one that's at RISD. And I haven't built it yet, so I really can't show you the differences. But once I do, I'll break them down and I'll show you how to do it. I'll show you a little cool little teaser that I've been working on. It's called Fretwork. Now I know why they call it Fretwork too, by the way, guys. Check it out. This is the embellishment that's going to be on the top of this Bombay, which wasn't on the the one at RISD. And after I did one diamond, trust me, I had fun for about this much of the material. And then the rest of it was just getting it done. I mean, this is only 1/8 of an inch. And it's really, really tender stuff, so I had to kind of take my time. And I have the side pieces, so this is what I've been working on. And I'm almost ready to start the upper pediment. I have the box made and a lot of the moldings made, and I got stuff everywhere. And once I figure it out, get it on top of the bonnet, and I kind of look like I know what I'm talking about, I'll get back.